Hi, everyone.
Yep. Hi, everyone. So I hope that you have been having a good summit and you had a good lunch, right? I'm very happy that we have here with us today Yuanruo, Software Engineering Manager from OGP, right? The topic that we are presenting today, Hack for Public Good 2022 and AWS. This is part of the innovation track. So in the next 40 minutes or so, we'll basically be running through, or rather I'll pick Yuanruo's brains and he'll take us through what OGP does, right? What are some of the products which they have built, what the approach that they take towards prototyping, right? And how they have actually leveraged on AWS to accelerate their innovation process.
Hey, thanks so much, Yunjun. So maybe before we start, maybe I can just get like a show of hands, like how many of you have heard of OGP before? Okay, about like 20%. And how many of you are maybe from the public sector? Oh, okay, about 40%. Yeah, so really cool. And thanks, Yunjun, for introducing me. So my name is Yuanruo. I'm an EM at Open Government Products. And I think you can see like there's a bunch of happy faces here. Who we are basically, we're the experimental unit, part of the Government Technology Agency. And what we do is, firstly, who are we comprised of, right? We are largely comprised of software engineers, product managers, product designers, as well as a strong corporate and policy team. And what we essentially do is we build products for the public good, so technology for the public good, right? And every year we actually run a hackathon, and we spend entire month, right, where we set aside our non-critical work and take that time to ideate, develop, and prototype new technologies, new applications, new platforms to actually solve citizen or public sector problems, right? And so just we're about a team of 100 right now, and you can check us up on open.gov.sg. But essentially, that is what our team is doing, and I'm happy to talk more about how we prototype today, how we've built a whole series of products, as well as how AWS has supported us in that journey.
Yeah. So maybe Yuanruo, to start off, right? How do you actually encourage like a builder culture within OGP? Because this culture is also something that at AWS we are very familiar with, right? But we would like to hear your thoughts on how do you actually encourage such a culture within OGP.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that there's a lot of application development going on like all around the world in a lot of organizations, and especially the public sector. There's so many wide-ranging problems, and many of these problems, they may not actually exist. Like if sometimes we go to senior management meetings, and they imagine that there's a potential solution to build something, whereas like at OGP, what we feel like what we think of is, can we solve the problems on the ground? So a lot of our products are very targeted at actually solving real user pain points, and we encourage that culture really by almost institutionalizing that experimental approach, right? By saying that every January for the last 4 years, we've actually spent the entire month building and setting aside non-critical work, and that forces us to continuously think about what are the other problems out there that we can solve. What are the opportunities to alleviate that the pain that citizens face or public sector agencies face, and how can we help to solve that?
Yep. Makes sense, right? So maybe you can take us through out of this list. I'm sure there are some familiar logos, right? Okay. As Singaporeans, I think the drivers amongst us will be very, very familiar with the app parking.sg. Right? It has totally changed the user experience of compared to the old ways of physically tearing parking coupons, right? Maybe can you share with us some of the apps or products that OGP have built that might actually be more under the radar, but yet they have actually helped to solve some real life problems?
Yeah, for sure. When I first joined OGP, we had just a couple of products. We had data.gov for public sharing of data sets. We had parking.sg, like you mentioned, to do away with paper coupons. And I'm sure many of the drivers amongst you will be very familiar with this. Subsequently, we looked across at broad-based public sector problems, for example, doing away with paper forms. So the government is, of course, a very large bureaucracy, and how do we digitize the government, right? So form messaging came into the picture. I think recently we've crossed about 170 or 180 million form submissions, which I think, personally, I think is pretty insane considering we only have 5 million people in Singapore. But there's so many other problems and pain points that we've elevated. So for example, Isomer is our static site platform that deploys informational sites for I think more than 200 government agencies today, and I think we're expanding into school sites as well. mc.gov.sg, that's a site where if you go to the polyclinics today, you can actually get a digital MC, right, instead of having a paper MC, and then you can forward it to HR, via a link rather than having to scan or take a photo, and so on and so forth. I think more recently, in the past couple of years, we've launched Redeem SG. Redeem SG is a voucher system where I think many of the households in Singapore have gotten $100 or $200 of vouchers over the last couple of years, and it actually helps the government to push out the help that's needed, for example, to our hawkers, and to just subsidize that expenditure and help people, especially during tough times like COVID. So there are many systems. Some of them are more well known, some of them are less well known. Many of them are in the prototyping phase, and I think that's what's really exciting about working at OGP, and how we can actually push out solutions very quickly.
Is there a common thread to some of the challenges faced with regards to building these products?
I would say that it's actually very varied across the different systems. Some of our broad-based systems, for example, digitizing forms, it turned out that it's a very broad problem, but it turns out that actually circumstance was our biggest factor. So we actually had a 100x uptick in usage after the first circuit breaker, right? Because everyone had to work from home, and the government notwithstanding. So the entire public service overnight, we had to essentially be able to digitize every single in-org process, across all 100 over agencies.
Cool. Right, maybe we can also focus on the Hack for Public Good 2022, right? The hackathon event which occurred earlier in the year. Maybe you can bring us through what are some of the pain points or challenges that were faced with regards to organizing the hackathon.
For sure. So this year it was kind of interesting in this January, because we had, although we know that we want to run a hackathon, it had traditionally always been an internal hackathon where we got our team of initially about 20 people, and then that's about maybe 3 years ago, subsequently 50 people, and now we're about 100 people. And when we're launching that hackathon, it not only got larger and larger in terms of number of participants, but that mission of wanting to build for the public good became stronger than just our team and just our organization. There were many different individuals, different companies, different agencies that also wanted to take part. So that became, I think, the scale itself became a challenge. Notwithstanding the fact that when you have such a wide variety of participants, cloud security itself also became a question, because we had to provision cloud accounts, right? And how do we do that, efficiently when people just want to show up and they want to prototype and build quickly, right? How do you do that safely when you may not necessarily fully know or trust everyone that's going to take part in the hackathon, and when you give away free cloud credits, how do you know they're not going to abuse the cloud resources that are provisioned? So that made it quite unique this year in terms of organizing a hackathon.
I understand. We'll dive a little bit more into that later, but perhaps do you also want to share with us with regards to effort spent in collating user requirements and feedback, some of the activities that were done pre-hackathon? How did that go?
Yeah, sure. So unlike most public hackathons, firstly, it's not a business plan competition. Secondly, it's not a completely open hackathon. We try to focus it on the pain points, like I said. So what we do actually, we organize visits to many agencies and have the on-ground staff come and share with the hackathon participants, what are the challenges they're facing at work, what are the challenges in the workflows and processes, and thereby, create like real life, like from the ground pain points for hackathon teams to work on. And the hackathon teams themselves, they evaluate, each problem surface, like figure out whether or not can this be a targeted solution that we are building? Can it be a broad solution where maybe the pain point is common? Or maybe, what might be a better way to address the pain point instead of just building that bespoke system, for that particular team, for the particular agency. Yeah, so there are many things to think about, like before jumping into prototyping or like coding intensively.
Right. That's true, definitely. How many projects actually came out of the hackathon eventually, right? And how does OGP actually measure the impact of these products?
Yeah, so the fact is that every hackathon we have a whole ton. I think this one we came out to probably at least 20 different prototypes, and all of them actually got airtime. So if you look at the picture, you see our director Hong Yi, but you also see like even more senior stakeholders, like for example Minister Josephine Teo, who actually graced the event and looked across all the products. And not only do we like prototype and potentially launch new products, but we actually bring these pain points like to the highest levels of government and bring it to the attention of our of political office holders and see whether we can push change through other means beyond the product. Yeah.
Okay. How then also do you iteratively map a product's roadmap post hackathon, right?
Yeah, so I think that's the part where we have to like be quite strategic about by selecting the winners, right? Which ones we think are going to make the most impact if we sink the resource into it. Because I think prototyping can be quick and dirty and very fast. The challenge is what do you do when you have limited resources, and how do you also encourage the other agencies and other sectors to also take aim at these problems and develop solutions for them.
Yeah. So on this concept of limited resources, right, with regards to scaling your dev teams to actually build these products, right, how has OGP actually gone about addressing this particular challenge? Because I think this is a challenge which a lot of tech companies are facing, right? A lot of enterprises are facing, right? So maybe if you can share with us a little bit about how OGP actually addresses this issue.
Yeah. So we are actually hiring rapidly, and we are always on the lookout, for strong engineers, strong product managers, strong designers, and by scaling ourselves, we think we can actually work on many of the ideas that we have shelved from the hackathon. But we also want to look into empowering, other tech teams. So I think traditionally government, it is quite hard to build technology in government. One of the reasons I think is that internal policies make it difficult to rapidly leverage the latest in cloud technologies, and we actually internally have efforts to push that.
Cool. I think you mentioned as well that for this year's hackathon, right, there's actually quite a bit of cross-agency collaborative efforts, as well as even participation from the industry, right? So, how has that actually improved the prototyping experience, like before all of these efforts came about? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I think if you look at the bunch of logos on the screen, this year we really had like a wide range of participants. We had other agencies such as the police force or the MOH, MOM, and just getting the message that tech is not just something for GovTech, but for all agencies. That's I think a really really solid message we wanted them to take away. We've also roped in educational institutions. I think they were very keen to have their students take part, as well as the private sector as well, such as Superbase, for example. And this made it, I think, a really exciting hackathon for us, because the perspectives were not just from one team alone, and it's not just from one sector alone, but from really a confluence of teams and a confluence of viewpoints. So for example, if we wanted to build a product that we think could work maybe for the private sector or maybe for the public citizens, like we would have more people to bounce that ideas off and consider a more diverse set of viewpoints. Yeah.
Right. Outside of the hackathon, right, is there a mechanism or a process if agencies want to initiate collaboration or co-building efforts with OGP?
That's a great question. We do have many feedback channels across many of our products. So, for example, if one of our products could be better, and we frequently actually do that, or hear that, see that, we actually take that feedback quite seriously, and frequently that turns into new features or extensible features or bugs being squashed. All of our products, I think I would say like at least 80% of our products are open source. So if you go to github.com/opengovsg, you can actually see all our code there. You can see many issues that are being filed, and if you're keen, you can actually contribute to the systems and platforms that we're building, or you can even fork it and turn it into something that's more suitable and more useful to your own specific use case. So like concrete examples would be FormSG, that's been open source for maybe about 2 or 3 years. Go.gov.sg has been open source since its inception in 2018. And if you go, you can see like almost all of our products are open source.
Right. Okay. I think for the industry partners that have supported OGP for this round, personally from AWS end, I do know that our cloud innovation team, CIC team, they have actually worked with OGP to share about the working backwards methodology that AWS takes, with regards to building products and with regards to coming up with the services that we have in our portfolio, right? And I think our SA team, our solution architects team, they also provided enablement or immersion workshops, right, for the OGP folks to actually be more upskilled in AWS services before they embark on this hackathon process, right? And I think at this stage we're nearing Q4 of this year, even for next year, whereby you are starting to plan for next year's hackathon. I think this process will be iterative and we'll continue on this approach, right? Yeah, cool. Okay, maybe now we can also share a little bit more about the AWS Control Tower service, right? I'm sure this service was underpinning service which enabled you to sort of scale up your hackathon efforts, right? Do you want to take us through a little bit more about how the service actually helped you?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I shared earlier, this year we had quite a large and diverse number of participants. And the biggest challenge in organizing that, at least from an engineering or technical point of view, is how do you provide these cloud resources in a very, very short amount of time? And so in partnership with AWS Solution Architects, we came to understand that not only can you federate your AWS accounts, but there is an entire service that's already ready for you to use, and just vend AWS accounts almost like that candy. That is not candy, but it's very. And so AWS Control Tower really came in to be extremely useful. It gave us the ability to rapidly scale up all our hackathon teams and also monitor its usage, leverage its security features, and just give us that assurance that we can actually pull it off with a very large and diverse number of participants without hampering or giving up on security. Because like I said, many of our hackathon teams, they actually interface with agencies and they learn real problem statements. They might even get real data, right? But if that data is sensitive in any way, we want to be really sure that that's being managed properly and that's not going to accidentally be uploaded to the wrong place, or we want to have some amount of governance over it without hampering the speed of development or the innovation that hackathon teams expect and rightfully so.
Yep. Point taken, right? So maybe you can also share with us a little bit more about your point of view, right? Before using the service, right? Previously, when you guys conducted your hackathons, and after using the service, right? What significantly changed, and what was the impact?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So as I think most people know, to get an AWS account, all you need really is a credit card to get started. The challenge is that when you run a hackathon, you're not going to ask all the participants to show up with their credit cards and pay out of pocket, right? But then if you ask the government to create a whole bunch of credit cards for every hackathon team, that's highly unrealistic, right? So in the end, what we did was that we had that central management account in which we set up not only your billing, but also your AWS credits, free credits. So thank you very much for that, by the way. And from that one central account, we were able to vend like I think 30 different accounts, and every hackathon team could just directly get to work immediately. They had like they could easily log in, get full administrative access to their accounts, use any services they require to build a product and get it off the door.
Yeah. Cool. So I guess the service really did provide a good foundation, right, for you to actually launch your hackathon and for it to proceed smoothly, right? So maybe now let's take a deeper look at what it actually entails, right? For the Control Tower service, essentially it's a managed service, right? It's a one-click service which will allow you to deploy landing zone construct, right? And maybe to orientate on this architecture diagram that we are seeing on the screen here, the top part of the diagram would be what we typically call the management account within an AWS organization, right? And then the bottom part of the diagram, we have the log archive account as well as the audit account, right? And both of these actually sit within the security OU, which stands for Security Organizational Unit. It's basically a way that how these accounts are actually structured and sit within this service that we have that's called AWS Organization. So maybe Renro, do you want to take us through about how the AWS organization service actually helped you with your hackathon efforts?
Yeah, for sure. So actually, we not only use it for hackathon now, we've actually also converted it into our internal learning and experimentation platform, so that all of our engineers at any point in time, when they need to try out a new AWS service or want to try out maybe Terraform or just experiment in any way, they all have individual accounts to play around with, right? But how AWS organizations roughly works is that it groups it is a federation mechanism to group individual AWS accounts under a single umbrella, right? And within that umbrella, you can group them into, say, different use cases. So like this bunch of accounts is for learning, that bunch of accounts is for hackathon, and through that, as well as the newly renamed IAM Identity Center, you can set up, which is essentially a single sign-on service. You can use that to create and group the individual access as well as the roles, and so you could have a single account that could perhaps provide login to perhaps 2 different AWS accounts, right? Because maybe you're part of hackathon team A, but you also want your own personal experimentation account, or perhaps in the hackathon you're interested to work on multiple projects in that month-long hackathon, right? So that really gave us like a really convenient platform to just easily do the administrative part of vending the account and making sure that everyone gets access to what they need, but no other.
Yeah. How about sharing about some of the SCPs, service control policies, that were applied to the OUs themselves, right? Because in the sense of, you mentioned the need for some governance guardrails, right? And you don't want your hackathon attendees to be, let's say, launching some non-legit services that is not approved of, for example, or launching.
Actually, we're extremely liberal. Like, we believe that any AWS service should be used, but I think where usually the public service and the government is concerned with is like data jurisdiction. So we don't necessarily want data to be uploaded outside of Singapore. So using the service control policies on AWS organizations, so what we can do is set a guardrail to say, okay, only launch services within AP Southeast 1. And that pretty much guarantees that developers have complete freedom to do whatever they want in the Singapore region, but we are also very confident that hackathon participants are not going to launch services in Tokyo or in the United States, for example.
Yep, totally. And for the sandbox OU that we see here, right? So we do know that we can also you can also create other OUs within the AWS organization account to fit the use case which you mentioned for some of your other hackathon workloads, right? So not all of them have to sit within the sandbox OU. You can have different OUs and you can apply different SCPs to these OUs to sort of have different guardrails around the various hackathon accounts that you may be provisioning, right, as part of this particular initiative, right? So on the left, we also have the service catalog, right? How does that actually help to quickly provision the workload accounts that you need for your prototyping efforts?
Yeah, so I think that's like a fantastic service because account creation can be quite tedious when you sign up, over and over again with like the same billing information. What the account factory does is a single form that you fill in, just providing very simple information such as, what is the root account email, what is the I think the groups that you want to assign that account to, and just within 15 or 20 minutes, you can get a full-fledged AWS account set up. And if you have to do this for like 20 or 30 people, you can just rapidly create many of them in parallel, and that really eases the burden of organizing the hackathon and then just provisioning all these accounts in a safe but convenient manner.
Yep, sounds good. Do you also maybe want to take us through the workflow of Check Who, right? But before that, do you want to share a little bit more about the driver for this app, right? What problem is it solving for? What's the thought process that went into designing the user experience and UI for this particular app?
Yeah. Sure thing. So maybe just share a bit on why we want to talk about this app. As you know, we in a hackathon we come up with a lot of ideas, and we try and solve a lot of problems. Like one of the main problems today, I think, that's really afflicting everyone is the scam space. Like all of us, get scammed by people who pretend that, hey, I'm from MOH, right? And they tell you in maybe like two different languages. And so this is one of the products coming out of the hackathon that we think has great promise. Yeah. So maybe I can just take us through that. So what we really want to do is authenticate official government communications. And when we look at the headlines around just within the last year, it's really obvious that this is like a very big issue. Like it goes beyond the OCBC scams that were so well publicized. But we also realize that scammers are not only really prevalent out there, but they are constantly changing tactics. They're constantly impersonating different people. You have like China official scams, you have MOH scam, all kinds of scams really. And we have seen people perhaps lose their life savings, right? And so during this hackathon, one of the key problem areas we're looking at is, can we do better? Can we actually build a secure communications channel so that as all of us are citizens, when we get a phone call, perhaps we'll be able to know whether or not it's actually the government or public officer calling you, right? Or is it a scammer, right? So maybe I can show you guys, what the app looks like. So this like your typical login page, a public officer, who's intending to call a member of the public, for whatever transaction or whatever follow-up, maybe based on a case or transaction that you have filed with the government. They log in, and maybe let's say it's Ben Tan from the Singapore Police Force, right? They log in, they get their one-time password, right? They end up at on the Check Who dashboard, right? And from this dashboard, they can actually fill in details of what their caller profile is. So for example, okay, my name is Ben Tan, I'm an investigation officer, with the Singapore Police Force. And from here, once the profile's been successfully updated, they can enter the NRIC as well as the purpose for calling a member of the public. And once they fill that in, like let's say I'm calling, S3002862G, 2862G, and they click notify call, what the citizen sees is that the SingPass mobile app, right, actually has an incoming notification that says, hey, this upcoming phone call, an investigation officer called Benjamin Tan from the SPF will be calling you shortly. And so when someone calls you and says, hey, I'm Benjamin Tan from the Singapore Police Force, you won't go like, hey, are you trying to scam me? We really try to regain and reestablish that level of trust that you can have when interacting with the government, rather than reduce the anxiety of potentially being scammed out of your life savings or something, right? The scammers nowadays employ a lot of tactics, to like psychologically pressure their victims into accepting their authority and following their instructions. But if we have a secure communication channel between the citizen and the government, and all manners of government agencies, then we can really safeguard that trust, right? And that's really the problem that we want to have, that we want to solve. Yeah.
Yeah. So how many team members actually worked on this application?
That's a great question. I think by and large, there were two people. There was one product manager and one software engineer. But the product manager was doing it part-time because she's also a marketing manager. And then the software engineer could only spend 1/3 of his time because he had like another main project to work on. And so really this is 1/3 effort from two people, essentially, to make this product happen.
Nice.
And moving forward, we're looking to resource this product better. But we think that it's really gotten to a place where we could really pour more resources into it, build out the solution fully, investigate how we can roll it out to like many of the wider audiences and wider agencies and try and make a broader impact.
Yeah. So is there a process for the agencies to actually onboard onto CheckWho at this point? Like, should they reach out to the product manager? Or?
Yeah, so that's something that we are continually working on. So it turns out that this is not actually a universally foolproof solution. So for example, most of our perhaps scam victims, many of them are senior citizens. And it's also true that our senior citizens struggle a bit more with like smartphone technology. They may not have SingPass mobile setup. And so this method of authenticated communication through SingPass mobile is unlikely to have broad coverage in that area. So we see some like flaws with the strategy. It's not like all perfect. And that's why I think innovation is hard, because yes, you can have the tech solution, but there's also a lot of on-ground reality that we kind of need to figure out. And on the agency side, we didn't know this at first, but it turns out that a lot of agency transactions with citizens doesn't actually involve collecting NRC, right? They may have like workflows that doesn't need the collection of so much sensitive information, and so when they see a solution, they might be like, hey, this might work, but we also have to change our process, to start collecting NRCs, and then they have to make that privacy trade-off of whether it's worthwhile to do so just to get on the app, or maybe they prefer not to because maybe things are really working well and there's no need to change. So this process of iterative like feedback and engagement with our stakeholders is necessary to fully understand the situation across all perhaps 100 government agencies and try and figure out what is the best way forward. Yeah, but we think it's very promising. Yeah.
Interesting. Is there an alternative plan then for the elderly users that you mentioned, right? Since they don't really use SingPass, if that's
that's quite challenging. I think we've seen a lot of campaigns already, whether it's in newspapers or warnings, or even like having the banks warn people on their websites and so forth that hey, you should not see links that suspicious links being sent, because we don't do that. Like we have a broad national strategy, I think, to try and close off all the gaps. But by and large, I think in terms of innovation, I think this is one of the new things that we want to push out.
Right. As part of planning next year's hackathon, right, from a user requirements gathering phase, right, just want to understand the approach a little bit more from OGP as well. So like for a product that has an MVP like this, that's already built, do you also take focus on it as part of next year's hackathon, or the hackathon is really a baiting ground for brand new ideas and you don't extend certain products that's built during hackathons?
I think the hackathon, everyone has free reign, so they're free to extend existing products as well as work on new ones. But I think where we really want to get to now is just resourcing our team more and figure out whether we can put resources into exploring more of these opportunities. It might be expanding this problem. It might be figure out even better approach to fight scams or many other problems, right? Like I think one interesting thing about the government and public sector as a whole is that problems come in all shapes and sizes, and they're really, it's not like perhaps many organizations or startups where they come up with one or a few ideas and want to perhaps change the world based on that. I think in the public sector it's many problems of varying shapes and sizes, and I think that's why the hackathon is valuable, because it helps us uncover and ideate on like all of these like different problems and potential solutions that we can have.
Yeah, true. And are there any ideas in the pipeline currently that may be primed for your hackathon efforts next year, if you can share, right?
No, I'm definitely happy to share. But I think what would be better is if I also invite you to the hackathon and you can join in January next year and see for ourselves like what are all the problems and the innovations that we're thinking of. Like, there's probably too many and too many to count at this point. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Right. So I think as part of the whole, hackathon team, right, it's important also for your participants to be enabled on cloud skills, like sort of what we mentioned earlier, right? And I think the support that we have provided, OGP, has definitely helped to also smoothen your prototyping efforts, right? And I think from a AWS skill builder and certifications point of view, right, from a learning standpoint, these are basically avenues that community, the wider tech community can definitely explore, and they can also partake in if they want to sort of grow their AWS skills, right, so that they can build better products, right. Even for OGP, I guess you guys are also pursuing AWS certifications as well as the skill builder program. Are there plans?
Yeah, we definitely have folks who are interested in AWS certifications. I personally think the associate solutions architect certification is a really good starting point for those who want to understand and certify their understanding of AWS technologies. And I believe the professional certificate is a really solid stamp of your skills. From chatting with many SAs from AWS, I understand it's basically an entry requirement. Like after you get into the company, that you must get your professional certification. And I've taken a look at the material. It's extremely extensive and takes many hours of hard work. So if anyone really wanted to level up their skills on AWS, I would definitely recommend those two, because we do recommend that internally for engineers who are interested.
Cool. Thanks for that. And I think at this point we are at the end of our dialogue. If there's anything, feel free to approach us off stage, right? We'll be happy to entertain any questions as well. If you can take some time to also complete the session survey, that would be very much appreciated. And thanks all for your time today for this session. And thanks, Yuan Ruo.
Thank you very much.